Have you ever heard about the time that Martians invaded the world from Mars in 1938? Orson Welles' famous radio broadcast. So back in 1938, in a very tumultuous time in America, Orson Welles has this radio broadcast and this radio hour. By the way, radio was all you had, no TV, so families would gather around the radio. Does anybody here remember that? Yep, there we go. I'm looking at you, Jerry. Yep. You gather around the radio, and they'd have programs, and the whole family would sit down and listen. Well, during this time in 1938, there was a really popular program that just about every single radio in the country would have been tuned to, but not Orson Welles yet. But that show ended 15 minutes into Orson Welles' show. So what happened is people turned over to that station, missing the whole beginning, that this was theater, that this was fake. And they hear a reporter from CBS News say, "Ladies and gentlemen, the most terrifying thing I've ever witnessed. I can see peering out of that black hole are two luminous discs. Are they eyes? It might be a face. But that face, ladies and gentlemen, it's indescribable." He proceeds to say, "The whole field's caught on fire, the woods, the barns, the gas tanks, the automobiles," and then he cuts out. Yeah. And then, a few seconds later, a voice comes on, and followed by radio static, and says, "Americans' worst fear has happened. Aliens have landed on the eastern seaboard. The National Guard has been called in." By the way, this is just a reenactment of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. Do you know what happened? It was pandemonium in the streets. He says, urbanites fled in terror. People took refuge in churches. Pregnant women went into labor early. People committed suicide. Looting broke out in the streets. It being America, men got out their guns and were ready to make their final stand. One woman ran into a church prayer meeting in Indianapolis and screamed, "New York has been destroyed. I believe the end of the world has come. You might as well go home and die." Life as we knew it was over. Very smart, very educated, very rational people, for a brief moment in time, across this whole country, believed the world was coming to an end and acted accordingly. And so it begs this question of us: how easy is it for us to slip into a lie? So often we look at the older generation, and there's a term for this that I'll bring up when I speak next week, the Flynn effect, where we look at the older generation as not being as savvy as us. The Flynn effect essentially said that each new generation has a higher SAT score than the previous. And the reason that's been debunked, because if that's true, then where our kids should be now is like Einstein-level genius, and they ain't that. I don't know if you've noticed. In fact, we may be reversing from where we once were. I love this generation. Right? And so there's this thought that says, okay, so what could I possibly be believing that isn't true? I mean, I don't know if there's anything I'd give up. I might do the toothbrush thing, but is there anything about God? Is there anything about church? Is there anything about how I live my daily life, how I interact with people that might not be true? Because if there is, God help me.